they were able to achieve that balance a little more in game 2 than in game 1 was because they were able to throw the football down the field. That was like a huge storyline coming out of the ODU game. Man, there's not really any semblance in that game of a downfield passing attack. You had it a little bit more in game 2. I think it's going to be important in game 3. From what I've seen on film, a lot of what LSU is going to do is match up man-to-man, make your guy beat our guy, make Lenore Sellers make those throws. And so it's going to be important to be able to try to achieve that balance. Now, how do they get there? Probably going to get a little bit incrementally better in all of those areas. Can you run the football a little better? Can you protect a little better? Can Sellers improve from game 2 to game 3? And can you hit some passes down the field? I think all those things working in concert, are going to be important.
Yeah, it's a completely different test in terms of how LSU wants to stop you compared to how
Kentucky wants to stop you. And
Kentucky understood, like everybody makes everything up, but everybody sort of has, for the most part, an identity on defense. For Kentucky, it has been sitting in that zone, and they're going to try to play great zone defense. And Dow passed on the opportunity to take some credit, but I do think he deserves as much as he is sort of taken from a negative side. He deserves a lot of credit for some of the calls he had in terms of attacking specific areas of Kentucky's defense with what they were trying to accomplish on defense. And so he does deserve that credit this week. So the plays that worked last week, for the most part, it's going to look very different as far as the plays that will work this week. Lots of man coverage. They blitz almost 50% of the time, which means you naturally are going to have an extra guy in the box. If they're blitzing, there's going to be an extra guy up near the line of scrimmage. So, I think you look at that, they were able to do what they did last week without really running Sellers. A lot of what Sellers did in the running game was him extending a play, keeping his eyes downfield, throwing the football. I think you'll have a little bit of that this week, but also because of that man coverage, that does open you up defensively to being susceptible to QB run on scramble plays. So if you have a shot play called up where you're trying to stretch the defense out and they run all those defenders off, there could be room for big plays from Sellers in the running game on scramble plays. And if that happens, maybe if you're LSU, you say, all right, we're going to have to spy on him, or
we're just going to have to slow our pass rush down a little bit and make those guys sort of play a little bit more under control. It seems like a lot of teams don't really like to use a spy because it does take that guy out of coverage or out of the pass rush. But at the very least, you could see this slow down the pass rush for LSU.
I was talking about the negative plays against Kentucky. I went back and looked at the box score, and it was not as pretty of a picture. I thought South Carolina gave up 13 tackles for loss to Kentucky. 13 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. And those numbers, those tackle for loss numbers are worse even from that game than the 2 Missouri games that we talked about in the last segment. So you can tell that's on Beamer's mind because you start thinking about LSU, Blake Baker, what he does. Talking about incrementally getting better, that's an area where you want to get better. Let's not have so many negative plays. You're able to counteract that against Kentucky because you played such great defense and you had those explosive plays that we were talking about. But that's an area they got to cut down on.
Absolutely. And when you look at these past 2 games, the balance on offense between run and pass has been right about that 70-30 split with the majority of the plays being runs. And I imagine when you kind of look at the inefficiencies that LSU has on defense, when it comes to stopping the run, at least through the first 2 games, I imagine we're probably going to see right around that same kind of balance this weekend as well.
Yeah, and I think for Carolina and for Sellers, this is another kind of awesome test to check off the box. Like if you're a young guy, you're going through things for the first time. And, the beauty of college football, in my opinion, is it's not like the NFL. Yeah, you get different schemes, but for the most part, a lot of the NFL has become very similar as far as team to team in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. So you may face a triple option offense on defense one week and air raid the next. When you're on offense, you may face a team with this weakness on one week and then this strength the next week. And so if you're a quarterback, you ever hear people talk about the quarterbacks where they're like, oh, this guy's seen everything you can throw at him. If you're Sellers, you're nowhere near that point yet. So you're going to have stuff thrown at you haven't faced yet, which is fun. It's exciting. I think big plays will be a huge key in this game, both for South Carolina offensively and for LSU offensively, because LSU on the other side, they will attack you down the field. We'll see if South Carolina can do the same.
A lot of big names going to be in town this weekend, including Josh Pate of CBS Sports. We'll talk to him coming up next, get his thoughts on this matchup between South Carolina and LSU. Going to broadcasting live out of Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, Tyler West and Chris going until noon here on the game.
Hello, hello. Testing. Is that better? Alrighty.
All right, leave it at that.
Imagine your guests strolling down memory lane, reliving the joy that these classic games evoke.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point and Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, broadcasting live at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia. Tyler, West, and Chris going until noon, getting you set for the big matchup this weekend between South Carolina and LSU. A lot of national voices going to be on site this weekend. Of course, College Game Day going to be in town, as well as our guest right now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines, Josh Pate of CBS Sports and the Josh Pate College Football Show. First of all, Josh, appreciate your time this morning. You've been very vocal about your love for South Carolina and the atmosphere at Williams-Brice Stadium. You get out to a lot of different college venues across the nation. What stands out to you about South Carolina? Why is Willie B so special?
Well, I appreciate you having me. The first thing that stands out is, I guess, how little it's recognized as a top-tier venue nationally. Some of these other places get, a lot of national credit whenever you see top 10, top 15 venues, top 10 game day environments. I'll see a lot of the same culprits, and they're right to be there. I go to every single one of them. I'm at a game every week, but I'll never forget, I think it may have been a Georgia game. It was delayed by rain. I know that. First time I ever came there for a game. And I remember I was with someone, and we're standing on the sideline, and I said, if you were to close your eyes right now, this would feel no different than some of the other places you would see on those top 10 lists. Why is this place not recognized as that? And then I've been back there a few times since then, and I've thought that every single time. And the follow-up to that is, these have not always been years where South Carolina is some top 10 team either. It's easy for people to be jacked up when you're in the top 10. The real measure of a fan base is, do they just bring it year over year over year, regardless of something external like the win-loss record? Everyone wants to win, but, if you're a real passionate fan base, they don't need to, they don't need to do those sorts of things for you to be passionate. So that's what's always stood out to me about it.
Hey, Josh, it's Wes Mitchell. Appreciate you doing this, man. Enjoy the show. And I know, I think you've talked about this a little bit, but can you talk a little, maybe from a more national standpoint, about just the opportunity South Carolina has this weekend as a team and a program when you didn't necessarily expect to be sitting here, especially the way that things started in week one. But here you are, really with the eyes of the college football world on your place, on your program, on your traditions. Can you talk about what that could maybe mean if South Carolina can take advantage and, of course, play well on the field too?
Yeah, I've always been a believer, obviously, that recruiting is the lifeblood of college football. So everyone knows that. But I think sometimes people overthink what it takes to be a good recruiter and what it takes for a program to recruit high-level athletes. Winning football games on big stages has been, and always will be, the best recruiting tool you can have. Now, if you're Georgia is probably the top program in the country right now, so they can always count on several very, very big stages that they'll be on in a given year, and they can usually count on them winning on that big stage. If you were coming into the season with South Carolina and we were to circle the stages that we expected to be truly national, I don't know that we would have circled this. We would have circled it as a big game, but we would not have known what time's kickoff going to be, what networks it's going to be on. Certainly, we would not have guessed which pregame shows were going to be in town. I would have guessed Alabama at Wisconsin if you would have polled me on this a month ago. So it drops in your lap. So a lot of people talk about right place, right time frequently. It's a really popular phrase. The way I view right place, right time is, from a program's perspective, get your program in the right place. Just have it in the right place, and then the right time will find it. So if Shane's got the program in the right place, the right time has found it this weekend. And then if you go and you win a game over a team that is perennially in the conversation like LSU, then that's the best message you could ever send in recruiting. Everything you've been telling kids, you didn't have to say. That Saturday morning or afternoon validated it in front of their eyes on a TV screen or in person. I know they got a lot of official visitors this weekend. So it's about recruiting. It's always about recruiting.
Josh, Chris Clark here. Thanks for taking time to join us, man. So since you mentioned LSU and how they're perennially in that conversation, LSU is one of those programs that typically you look at them, even in years where maybe they only win 4 or 5 games, not quite up to their standard, but they're always super talented. How do you view the talent level and maybe the ceiling of this year's LSU teams compared to some maybe in the past? What type of LSU team is coming to Williams-Brice on Saturday?
It's a really interesting question, actually, because normally when you think LSU football, you think even if they don't have anything else, they're going to have good defensive line play and they're going to have high-level athletes in the secondary. Well, that is not this year's LSU team. It wasn't last year's LSU team. And last year's LSU team had a Heisman Trophy quarterback on it for just good measure. But the things that you can count on LSU having, they didn't have. Now, what Brian Kelly did, I'm sure a lot of you guys have talked about this week, and we talked about it all spring and summer if you're a college football fan, is he went and hired really, really good guys on the defensive side, just like Lincoln Riley did at USC. So Brian Kelly made the right moves. My question when they came in, those coaches, as it still is now, is what do they have to work with? And I'm not sure still, either in the secondary or up front, that they have the kind of premier depth and athleticism and versatility, especially up front, that your vintage LSU teams will have had. Now, this is speaking as sort of first world problem for LSU, because they're still really, really good players. They may not be as deep and as high level as they normally are, but they're plenty capable of competing in every game they play. They're capable of winning most games they play. You're looking already at a situation where their back's against the wall because they lost in week 1. And the prospect of going 1-2 through the first 3 weeks for LSU when they still have 4 or 5 more losable games on their schedule, it kind of puts us in a situation where we're looking at the first must win of the season for one of these major teams.
Again, talking to Josh Pate of CBS Sports and the Josh Pate College Football Show, head of Saturday's South Carolina LSU game. And you in the offseason get to sit down with a lot of different coaches around the country. You sat down with Coach Beamer a couple months ago and, got some insight into this South Carolina program for what is a very important season this year in year number 4 under Beamer. What stands out to you about him as a head coach, and what makes him unique or special compared to some of the other coaches around the country for what he's doing here at South Carolina?
I think if I were to take the head coaches just across the country and I were to, put them in a social setting, just put them at a table of 8 in a restaurant or something like that. Shane Beamer seems to me like the guy who would acclimate the best and the quickest. He's a guy who absolutely has earned the spot he's got, but he also hasn't become sort of detached from the real world. And you can tend to do that sometimes when you enter that different tax bracket, and then you're also insulated bubble-wise with what your job entails. And Shane Beamer's not that, which is a good thing. The other thing is, I think he did a really good job when we did that sit-down with him of explaining how intricate and layered the process is of running a program. I always love those guys to dive deep on that if they will. I don't even think they know it fascinates people. And maybe it doesn't, everyone else, but it fascinates me to listen to a coach talk about how meticulous you have to be, not just on game day. I'm talking about scheduling a meeting the morning of practice number 8 in the spring, and that entire meeting consisting of going over every detail that's going to happen in that practice. Who's going to use which corner of the field? How many cones do you need down there? How many assistants do you need down there? How much yardage do you need? Can we fit this wide receiver drill in over here? Just to listen to that. And sometimes these staffs will let me sit in on those meetings, and it's so fascinating because I don't think the general public has any clue how much detail goes into running a football program and how much you have to delegate because it's impossible for one person to do it. He does a really good job of that. He does a really good job of disseminating it and describing it, and that's what stood out the most to me when we made our trips there.
Josh, got about a minute left. Real quick, give us maybe one key to victory for either side Saturday at Williams-Brice.
What happens on 3rd and 5+ when South Carolina's defense is on the field? To me, it's pretty straightforward. I don't think LSU will be able to run the ball that effectively. And weather conditions or no weather conditions, what South Carolina's pass rush can do to affect the game. You don't have to sack a guy to affect the game. What they can do on 3rd and 5+, and can they get themselves in that position? Can they earn the right to rush the passer? That will be the difference in that game, I think.
Certainly looking forward to it, and excited to see you coming to town. And should be a great environment at Williams-Brice Stadium, as we know you're looking forward to. Appreciate your time this morning, Josh.
I appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. Josh Pate of CBS and the Josh Pate College Football Show. Come back, wrap up hour number 1, talk a little bit about what Josh had to say there, and continue to preview this matchup with South Carolina and LSU. We're broadcasting live out at Gold Line Framing, 511 12th Street here in West Columbia. Tyler Ed, West Metro, Chris Clark, going until noon here on the game. Welcome back in. It is Extra Point and Gamecock Central takeover of Goal Line Framing, 511 12th Street here in West Columbia. Tyler Head, West Metro, Chris Clark going with you until noon. Quick reminder, September is Hunger Action Month. The game and Hardee's are teaming up for the Hardee's Roundup just by going to your participating Hardee's and round up your bill to the nearest dollar amount. All donations go to the Harvest Hope Food Bank for students. Also come out and round up and say hello to the game. Bill Gunter today going to be out the Hardee's location at 100 Creech Road in Blythewood from 3 until 6 p.m. Come by and hang out with him. And again, round up your bill to benefit the Harvest Hope Food Bank for students. Again, appreciate Josh Pate joining us for a couple minutes there. And again, one of the premier voices when it comes to college football from a national standpoint. It's always interesting to hear a perspective like that about not only the South Carolina program, but somebody like Shane Beamer as well. And again, I thought his answer there on what makes Beamer unique and special to this program was really good at the end. And again, this weekend is an opportunity for South Carolina to put on display that it is certainly moving in the right direction with this game against LSU.
Yeah, by the way, shout out to our friend Kendall Walsh, who owns Gold Line. She was very excited about Josh being on the show.
Oh, she's a big fan too.
She's a huge fan.
Nice.
I tried to convince her that he was here in person. She didn't believe me, but yeah, Josh does a great job and really has grown that thing, man. Like he has.
That's my biggest like admiration is just
He's
like
hit the
watching
rocket
him.
shift.
Yeah,
the rocket ship, right?
Started
Like,
off
Right.
humble beginnings in Columbus, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always had a great deal of respect for South Carolina's atmosphere and what they are all about, what this fan base is all about. So I do think that that's pretty cool to see a guy who has the experience of going to all these other places and then kind of seeing the respect he has for what people do here at South Carolina in terms of just creating an atmosphere. And every time this fan base is challenged, they really tend to step up to it. Like, I mean, think about the fact last year you got Kentucky coming into town, and it had not been a fun year at that point. And it was like they were playing for a spot in the national title game.
It's like a home playoff game before
Yeah.
they had home playoff games.
Yeah, it was insane. So I expect similar things tomorrow. It's going to be a madhouse. Excuse me. We got one more day to wait. I expect that on Saturday. Today is Thursday, last I checked. And I'm pumped though, guys, and I think it's going to be a good game. I don't know who's going to win, but I think it's going to be a good game.
You don't know who's going to win yet.
I won't know until Saturday.
Did you not submit your picks
prediction?
to
I mean,
Jack
I
last
put
night?
one in because Jack's going to flip out if I don't, but
He also made us do them earlier this time.
Yeah.
So like
I'm
I need
saying.
more time to think about this thing. Like I think it's going to be a close game. But no, but Josh, he does do a great job. And the cool thing about what Josh does is, I mean, he mentioned he goes to a college football game every week, which honestly I'm a little jealous of. Like that would kind of be cool to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to pick a random awesome game I want to go to and go probably get a sideline pass from the school, go hang out, go talk about the game. But he does have a really good perspective. He's not just sitting, as Billy Napier would say, in a basement, coming up with college football takes and kind of doing a thing. Oh, South Carolina, they don't have a good atmosphere. Like he's been here, he's experienced it. And I think he was spot on with his takes about LSU as well. Like that's something that I thought, like I had observed, but I was curious to see if his opinion matched, and it happened to. This is a team that great point about their D line, their second. Like you think about LSU, it's across multiple coaches. It's D line, it's secondary, it's receivers. Even in years where they haven't been great, and they have some questions at all those spots. Their identity has very much been different under Brian Kelly last year and this season.
And obviously, we were focusing a lot on what this means for South Carolina this weekend, but it can't be understated how huge this is for LSU too. They're trying to avoid a 1-2 start.
Yeah,
like this is a team that a lot of people factored in as maybe a dark horse playoff team that could see that go out the window if they lose this weekend. There's a lot of pressure on Brian Kelly and LSU coming in this matchup on Saturday too.
There is, and I think there are going to be a lot of teams in the SEC. Look back to all the guys we have had on just kind of in the lead up to the season when we would just get random, hey, let's get an Oklahoma guy on, let's get an LSU guy on. And the expectations for all those fan bases is to win. And as we've talked about, not everybody can win. So what are the dynamics in this new 16-team SEC where you had a power move by bringing in Brian Kelly? Like there was a stretch where I really feel like you did not see very many Power 5 to Power 5 movements within the college football coaching world. it's kind of been a little bit more common as of late. And so now some of that is you always sort of look at those situations where somebody's like not happy behind the scenes a little bit with where they're at. But point being, they go out, they take him from Notre Dame. The expectations then are for you to compete for national championships. And nobody who thinks they're competing for national championships is thinking they're starting 1-2.
Right. 1 hour down, 2 more hours to go. Again, broadcasting live here at Gold Line Frame in West Columbia. We'll check in with Jack Feltry coming up next in the next couple segments as we roll into the 10 o'clock hour. The X Point Gamecock Central Takeover Hour here at Gold Line Framing, going until noon here on the game. Tyler Head for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Rain heading in for this weekend. Going to be here for the next couple of days. As I tell you all the time, you have an open crawl space under your home and you've experienced rain or are about to experience rain, you could have some standing water under your home, which could create a lot of issues like high humidity and condensation, can create mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites underneath your home. That can lead to things like wood rot and floor joist problems as well. And those smells and awful odors can get into your home and affect the way that your family breathes, which is certainly not good. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists come in. You can go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate your home's foundation and your crawl space and get you fixed up just right so you and your family can live comfortably going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point Gamecock Central takeover of not Firehouse Subs. We're at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, Paddle and Chelsea. We'll be out at Firehouse Subs very soon.
We're going close to here.
I'm hungry. I'm thinking about Firehouse
We'll
Subs
eat some Firehouse Subs
as
later,
I often am.
later
But
today.
no, today we were out at Gold Line Framing, 511 12th Street here in West Columbia. We got koozies, we got T-shirts. When Josh shows up here, hopefully very soon, we'll have some tickets to give away as well. Not only for the game this upcoming weekend, but also my morning jacket, which is going to be out at PNC Pavilion coming up tomorrow night in Charlotte. Got some tickets to give away for that as well, so you can come by and see us broadcasting live until noon. Jack Veltri usually joins me on Thursday, so we'll get him in here for a couple segments. Jack, first of all, appreciate you taking a little bit of time this morning. And you wrote about yesterday on Gamecock Central the importance of the defensive matchup that we have coming up this weekend. And especially with potential of rain coming in on Saturday as well, this could really be one of those low-scoring defensive slogs that it might be first team to 20 wins kind of game.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on as always, but I would say you're definitely right about that. And the thing with this matchup is you notice LSU likes throwing the ball a lot more. It's not even really comparable. I mean, they average more than 300 passing yards compared to well under 100 rushing yards. And couple that with the fact that their lead running back, John Emery, is out for the rest of the season with a torn ACL he suffered in practice last week. So I think there's going to be a lot more passing in this game. Now, what could that look like for LSU? Well, from talking to some people on the LSU beat and stuff, it seems like with Garrett Nussmeier, he's a gunslinger. He can throw. He's got, Kyron Lacey and other weapons on the outside. But because of how good South Carolina's defense is in the pass rush, you could be looking at a lot of, snap the ball in shotgun and then get it out as soon as you can. Because you don't want to be – the thing with Nussmeier is you don't want to be waiting in the pocket forever because, he hasn't suffered a sack yet this year. But that is something where if he takes a while in the pocket and lets the play develop for too long, he could be taking some hits. So it's definitely going to be a lot of short game, I think, and trying to get the ball out as quick as they can.
You got, guys, a defense in South Carolina that has 10 sacks on the season so far, which is first in the SEC, second in the entire country. Then you have LSU, who has not allowed a sack. They're the only one of only two teams in the SEC does not allow a sack.
Who's the other one?
Missouri.
That makes sense.
So something has to give this week. Chances are it's going to be a little bit of both. Like I think you're going to have this thing's going to be in the balance, so to speak. Like neither side, I would imagine, is going to dominate the other. But Jack, what do you think of the keys, man, to Carolina's defensive line doing just enough against this O-line? Because I think it's just going to look completely different than what we saw last week. Like last week, we saw Carolina's defensive front just completely overwhelm Kentucky. It clearly affected their quarterback play. Kentucky had some good wide receivers coming into this game, but they were completely nullified by that pass rush. This week, it should be completely different. And I don't know what else the guys from LSU told you, but also one thing I noticed is LSU throws the football down the field, man. Like if they get that protection, then I think it shifts to they're going to try to attack you. If obviously, like you said, if they have to, if Carolina is still getting in the backfield, then it becomes a little bit more of a short passing game type of game plan, I think.
Yeah, no, Wes, you're definitely right. And I think it does start. I think the biggest matchup of this weekend is on the edge with the offensive tackles LSU going up against the edge rushers and Dylan Stewart, Kyle Kennard, even guys like Brian Thomas and JT Gear and Gilbert Edmond. I mean, it's going to be a fascinating matchup to watch. And I think if South Carolina can get in the backfield, I don't think they're going to get in the backfield as much as they did against Kentucky. Just in general, that Kentucky game, I was asking Clayton White about it yesterday because obviously they held the Wildcats to just 44 passing yards. It's the lowest mark of his time at South Carolina with any defense, and it's going to be hard to replicate that. This LSU offense really does like to throw the ball. I mean, Nussmeier, he's thrown for, I think, 300 yards in both of his games so far, and he's got good receivers. I mean, Kyron Lacey's going to be a first-round draft pick as long as he stays healthy and productive like he has been. So I do think if this defense can get in the backfield and create some pressure. I think maybe you force some bad throws off Nussmeier's part, because here's the thing: he's probably not gonna want to, take a sack, but at the same time, like if he's about to get hit, he's not gonna want to make a bad throw either. So create some pressure, force some bad throws. Maybe you don't get a ton of sacks, but you're getting some turnovers and takeaways. That's kind of how you can win this game. Now, at the same time, if LSU is protecting enough up front and you're giving Nussmeier more time in the backfield to make some plays or even run the ball, maybe if LSU can finally figure it out, I just have a tough time seeing South Carolina win if LSU is just having time to make throws and stuff. It would just take Nussmeier to be a little off his game with the rain and stuff for LSU not to be successful on offense. But if he's given enough time, I don't know how South Carolina is going to be able to stop him.
Well, I mean, watching back the LSU Nichols game, it kind of reminded me, like, I feel like these teams, LSU and South Carolina, they're in a little bit of a similar boat in that they've both had a game where it's like, man, like you won. Now LSU beat Nichols State 44-21, I think was the score.
That was.
But that was not a pretty game for LSU, particularly defensively. They gave up our boy Colin Guggenheim.
Great name.
He had a 67-yard touchdown run out of the Wildcat. He put up, well over 100 yards. Like, there were some ugly moments for LSU defensively, and even with LSU scoring,
Guggenheim's pretty good, Chris.
He is good.
That's also their backup running back too.
Yeah, but he was like an all-conference guy. Yeah, he didn't start. They have like a smaller back, and then they have this guy. But anyway, and they gave up some passes. Like, it was ugly for LSU defensively. Then they lost their starting defensive tackle. LSU was a little bit out of sorts in that game offensively, which sounds weird to say because you put up 44 points, right? But they hit a bunch of explosive plays. Nussmeier missed some throws in that game. So, I don't think he's, I don't think South Carolina is facing, Cam Newton in this game or anything. He's a guy that's been very well protected. He does a good job of either getting the ball. He does what the play dictates, I think, is the best way.
That's right. Yeah.
He gets the ball out quickly if that's what the play dictates. If it's a deep shot, he can definitely push the ball downfield, but he's been very well protected so far, to your point, Jack, in doing that. But both, Kentucky was a better test for South Carolina than Old Dominion. Southern Cal was a better test for LSU, and they obviously lost that game, than Nichols State. But both games were tests for both teams, right? So I think we're still learning a lot about both these schools. One thing for me, the injuries for LSU, you mentioned John Emery, the running back, being out. Jack, they also have a starting defensive tackle out. It's probably their best tackle. They've had a couple receivers banged up. Chris Hilton Jr., Kyle Parker, who are questionable for this game. It seems like they'll probably play. How much does that help LSU in the passing game?
Well, guys, I'm telling you, I got a feeling. So LSU, there's been a lot of talk. Hey, they're not really even attempting to run the football. They're going to watch the film of last week. And if there was one thing that you look back and you're like, man, there's a little bit of kind of, I don't know if worry is the word, but you could be susceptible to some things. South Carolina, right up the middle against the run when Carolina's on defense. That was the one place Kentucky did have some success. Clayton White even talked about giving this defensive front a little bit more freedom to sort of be athletic and sort of act on their own and try to create negative plays. When you do that, it also sort of leaves you a little bit susceptible to a team that's just going to say, hey, we're going to take the air out of the ball, run it right at you, and we're willing to take our 6, 7, 8-yard gains. And Kentucky had quite a few of those early on. So I got a feeling LSU is going to come out. They're going to try to establish the run early. We're going to be talking about Kyron Lacey and the passing game and Nussmeier. 8 out of the first 10 plays in this game, I would not be shocked at all if they were runs for LSU, because they're going to know if we establish that early, that's going to slow down that pass rush for South Carolina. Then you can go back to all the things you've been doing so far. Game plans a lot of times are matchup based. They're going to establish the run, or they're going to attempt to establish the run very early in this game if you're LSU.
And that's the thing, is that they haven't been able to get the run game going literally at all. Like John Emery,
They haven't tried, I feel like.
yeah, they've tried. I mean, they tried against Southern Cal and stuff, but you see that without Emery last week, they really weren't able to get anything going on the ground. I mean, you look at the box score last week, they only had 68 total rushing yards, averaging 3.2 per carry. So that's the thing. And another issue with their run game is the fact that despite how good this offensive line is, Joe Moore finalists and stuff, their run blocking has been horrible so far. So if they're going to win this game, yeah, maybe they could do it through the air with Nussmeier, maybe throwing for like 300 yards again, although I think that's going to be hard to do against this secondary, which I think played very well last week, coupled with the fact that South Carolina was very good coming off the edge in the pass rush. But you're right, Wes. I think LSU is definitely going to try to set the tone early in the run game, and then if they can't get it going, they'll just rely on their pass game. But I do think South Carolina, they did give up some chunky runs last week, but I think when it comes down to it, especially deep in their own territory, they were able to get the stops on third down and hold Kentucky to field goals. So they kept them out of the end zone. So that's the big thing. It's not the end of the world to give up some chunk yards, but you definitely want to make the stops when you have to.
Again, we hope South Carolina walks out of this weekend 3-0 and looking ahead to potentially 4-0 with Akron coming up next weekend. But coming up next, I want to take the devil's advocate approach here and say, even if Carolina doesn't win, what kind of positives could we take away? What kind of things would you like to see this weekend that would make you feel good about it? We'll hit that coming up next. It is the Extra Point and Gold Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, broadcasting live at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia. Tyler West and Chris Jack Belcher hanging out with us too on this Thursday here on the game. Welcome back in. Extra point. Gamecock Central takeover. We're out at Gold Line Framing, 511 12th Street here in West Columbia. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, Jack Felcher hanging out with us here for a few minutes. Going up until noon, I mentioned this before the break. We've talked a lot of the offseason when looking at South Carolina's schedule. Hey, if you made it out of the month of September at 3-1, you'd feel pretty good about it. And a lot of people said, hey, the Kentucky game is winnable, and maybe LSU was the one that was going to be the tougher test. So right now, sitting at 2-0, you're still in line for something like that to happen, as well as being 4-0, which we certainly hope does happen this weekend. If Carolina was not successful in winning the game this weekend, what things would you at least like to see that would have you feeling positive coming away from it? We'll start with you, Jack.
I think, if you lose this weekend, it really, I don't want to say takes a damper on your season because it's like your first loss of the year. But from a big picture standpoint, this is a game I feel like they have to win, mainly because, national spotlight's on you. And then you also have the fact of recruiting and everyone, all these recruits want to come to town and see South Carolina play, this and that. So I think kind of to answer your question, if they were to lose this game, I just think you want to see the defense continue to play well. I think if you're going to lose this game, I think it's going to be in the fourth quarter. It's going to be a tight-knit game. And you don't want to see your offense turn over the ball. I think that's another thing is you want to be playing clean football. I think for the most part, outside of Sellers maybe fumbling twice and the interception last week, he's been very good. At ball control and all that. So I think those are the two main things in my opinion. Just clean defense and keeping the game tight with little to no turnovers.
And again, there's no denying, like, losing this game would suck with all the implications and the wise of the nation upon you. But there's definitely a difference between losing on a last-second field goal by 3 points or 2 points or something like that and, getting beat by 3 touchdowns. So there's certainly a path where even in losing, you still come away from it feeling okay. And like you said, if the defense can continue to play well, and again, you hold this LSU offense under 20 points and, end up coming up short 20-17 or something like that, or, somewhere along those lines, then, again, you don't want to lose, but you'd still feel, I'd say, pretty okay coming away from it.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Tyler. I mean, there's a big difference. You want to compete. There's a big difference between LSU comes to town, they play well, you play well, and, one side just makes an extra play. Or, I mean, it's football, dude. The ball could just bounce the wrong way for you. I feel like that would be tough to swallow in the moment, like for a fan to just say, man, we did everything right and still lost the game. But doing everything right does not guarantee you're going to win the game. That's football, that's sports, that's life, if you want to get existential on it. But I think, guys, for them, you want to go show you can compete on this stage because it is a little bit different when the national guys are sort of focused on you. And there's a lot to sort of try to just not pay attention to if you're South Carolina. So, we've talked about how, hey, this may not be a young team. In some areas, it is a young team. For the most part, you would say it's a new team at a lot of areas. So we talk about the guys that have played well at sort of the smaller schools and taking a step up and playing at the SEC level. You maybe didn't get this attention when you were at a smaller school either. You didn't have college game day in town. You didn't have your classmates talking about the game quite as much as maybe you do here. So I think to just deal with all that and show you can would be a major step for this team and this program, whether you win or lose. And I think if LSU just comes in and says business like, hey, we're still LSU, you're still South Carolina, and they just control the game, that feels a little different to me versus just both sides compete their tails off and LSU scores in the fourth quarter and wins the game.
Yeah, I could not go as far as to say South Carolina has to win this game. I mean, if you don't, assuming you beat Akron, you're coming out of the first month of the season at 3-1.
And they're still going to play the rest of the schedule, by the way.
Yeah. They are. And like, if you win, it's ideal to win this game for a lot of reasons because, then you're staring at 4-0. You are creating not an easy path, but you are now creating a path to go get to, like, that seems to be everybody's like floor of let's go play a postseason football game again after slipping from there the first couple years. Whatever happens after that, people have differing opinions on, but basically it's kind of gravy, right? Let's go play in the postseason. A lot of times you go through the schedule and say you're going to have to pull some upsets to do that. Well, they've already done that against Kentucky. You got something, Wes?
Oh, no. I was moving this.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah,
I was like, he's got a point here. Am I saying something wrong? But, you create a better path for yourself. 4-0 is better than 3-1 when you're looking, okay, we can go out and beat Akron and beat Wofford, and I guess we can. Do we still put Vandy as most winnable after that? I don't know,
pretty
guys.
scary right now.
I don't know.
Guys.
It's a scary team, but that looks a lot better, right? And I think what Josh Pate mentioned in his segment with us earlier, of you're creating that validation, right? Shane Beamer being able to tell recruits and show them not only the environment, we think it's going to be a good environment, win or loss, right? Unless it gets totally out of hand, like you mentioned, Wes, and the environment won't last very long. As long as it's a good, close game, it's going to be a great environment, I think, on Saturday, and you got game day. You can show these recruits, we're 3-0. We've just upset a couple SEC teams. Last year was a blip in the radar. Like, we had a bad year. We had a subpar year. We're right back. We're moving in the right direction. There's plenty of examples of big time prospects being in Columbia for a game and they'll lose. South Carolina will, and all the fans go, well, that guy's not coming here. Nick Harbor for the Georgia game that year, Jordan Birch, 30-3 against Clemson. Well, he ain't coming, and they do. But, those are sometimes more isolated. You would, of course, love to win this game, but it's not only about winning the game for recruiting.
And that's an interesting point that you bring up there, because in, let's say, the hypothetical scenario, you did lose on a last-second field goal or something like that, with all these high-level recruits coming in, you can almost sell that as like, man, you're the difference. You could be the difference in that 3 points and us winning that game next year or whatever it may be down the line, because you're going to face LSU next year with the way the schedule works out anyway. So, yeah, losing doesn't mean that all those guys – it's not going to be like hopefully not like the Florida-Miami game where the Miami guys are walking off the field saying, don't come here, come to Miami and all that kind of stuff. Like, you can still spin positives even if you do come up short on Saturday.
And it's going to, either way, like, it's going to be a great environment, I think. I mean, weather aside, I think game day being there is a huge deal. Like, it hasn't happened in 10 years. It already shows that South Carolina is back on the right track. I think this is still going to be on their way to making a bowl game. I think this team is, regardless of the results this weekend, I mean, starting out 3-1 potentially, or 4-0. I mean, the last time they started out a season 4-0, I think you have to go back to 2012. And starting out 3-1, at least, one or less losses in the first month of the season is so uncommon for this team, especially with Beamer, because, I mean, you look back at the last few years, it's been, 2 losses, and then 3 losses in September last year. So starting out this well would be great. And then you couple that with the fact that recruits are going to be in town. They're going to see how insane the environment hopefully is and just what it's like. I mean, regardless of outcome, I mean, it's not the end of the world. You lose this game, but you definitely want the crowd to show up big and put on a good show for maybe the future of your program.
Well, you start looking at this schedule too, guys. We talked about Akron next week, but depending on where you're sitting, 4-0, 3-1. I mean, look at what's next. Yeah. That's where you have Ole Miss, at Alabama, at Oklahoma. So, you're going to take some losses in there, like you just are. I think now what happened Saturday also probably changes how we feel about how good this South Carolina team is as well. So it maybe shapes how you feel about those 3 games. But we talked about splitting Kentucky LSU. Can you win one of those 3? Like I feel like that would be a reasonable but attainable, but also would really help you start to stack those wins if you can just find one win out of that group. And I'm here to tell y'all, reading about Oklahoma a little bit, Oklahoma's offensive line, they have struggled so far.
They replaced it the entire one this offseason. So
Yeah, they replaced it. It's gone.
They are finding you can't just go take 5 transfers and create an offensive line. So now that game's still well down the line. They're going to possibly improve between now and then. But if you want an early game that maybe before the season we were going, it's going to be tough to win. That maybe it shifted a little bit, much like Vandy has shifted, hey, it's going to be a little bit tougher than we thought. Oklahoma, I feel like if they were to play South Carolina right now, that would be a very winnable game for the Gamecocks. They also, the reports out of Oklahoma, they sort of just let Dylan Gabriel go because Jackson Arnold comes along and he's their young up-and-comer. I mean, they're having the same, they're having growing pains of a young quarterback as well. So that's a game depending on how much they can improve. I saw a thing, they're averaging 3rd and 8 on 3rd downs right now.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, sounds like Carolina last year. So maybe you can steal one out of those 3 and really set yourself up for the second half of the year.
Jack, you're going to be joining me for the halftime show tomorrow, so we'll get your final thoughts and predictions ahead of Saturday. But before we let you go, as we sit here on Thursday, what is your vibe and feel about this game? Roughly a little over 48 hours out.
I think South Carolina I think they're ready to go, right? Because we've spoken to the coordinators and we've spoken to the players in Beamer now. I feel pretty good about where they're at in terms of preparation. They're not letting the big picture this entire weekend with Spotlight and game day being here overshadow what they have to do. Now it's all going to come down to whether or not they play well on Saturday, and that kind of remains to be seen. But I think they know what they have to do. It's just about going out there and doing it. At the end of the day, LSU is in kind of a similar spot to where if they lose this game, I mean, I don't know what that does for their college football playoff implications, but it makes things a lot tougher and the seat warms maybe just a tiny bit for Brian Kelly, though I think he's doing a pretty good job there at LSU. But for South Carolina, I think I'm feeling pretty good about them right now. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick them yet, but they're definitely – I think it's going to be a great game, though, this weekend.
Well, you don't have your picks in, Jack?
You made
You have to have those in by Wednesday.
No, I don't do my picks till everyone else does theirs. I do mine at the last minute. So,
all right, appreciate it, Jack. We'll check in with you again tomorrow.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right, we're broadcasting live, 511 12th Street, Gold Line Framing here in West Columbia. I know the nerve of some people, right?
It's ridiculous.
We're broadcasting till noon. Tyler West and Chris here on your Thursday on the game. Test. 1 2 1 2. All right, that's me. All right, this is Wes.
Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
Still really loud.
Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3 4.
That's good. All right, now Chris.
Hello. Here I am. I'm here. Testing. 1 2 3. Captain
That's good.
Sorensen.
Okay, perfect. extra point. Gamecock Central takeover of Gold Line Framing, 511 12th Street here in West Columbia. We got customers in here giving away tickets. We're having a great time. T-shirts, koozies. I think Josh is going to show up at some point. We don't know.
We don't know. Kendall Walsh is now here.
Kendall beat Josh. You're replacing bets on
Yeah.
who's going to show up first. Kendall beat Josh here. So
Like 5
there's that.
seconds later, she walked in.
That's right. So if Josh shows up, maybe we'll have some more tickets to give away. But hanging out here and obviously talking plenty about South Carolina and LSU this upcoming weekend. Want to dive into a little bit more of what Dow Loggins had to say yesterday when talking to the media. We'll also get to Clayton White here coming up in a little bit as well. Let's go cut number 12 here, Dave. This is Dow talking about getting the tight ends involved and what they've done in the offense so far this year.
Players, so it definitely those things definitely help. Balance in the offense is not run pass all the time. Is it your guys touching the ball? Is Mike Smith touching it? Is Josh Simon touching it? Is Jared Brown? Is Rocket Sanders? Is it Robbie Ashford, Lenore Sellers? So like the ball distribution is important, especially when how many times we throw last week? Like 20, 23? Like when there's only one football and all of a sudden you're playing, we only play 50 plays total anyway, but when all of a sudden it's now you 50% of that time you're passing, 50% of the time you're running, you have to have that ball distribution, and it keeps everyone locked in and everyone understands their role. And you know how it is. Like every tight end receiver wish we threw the ball every snap, and they think they're always open.
And the story of the tight end room so far this season is obviously Michael Smith, who you guys, again, very high on during the offseason, has made an immediate impact, was the first target in both games. So far this season has been hit or miss like everybody's been when it comes to, the blocking on the outside and stuff like that. But nevertheless, it's come in and made a big impact. And, I was talking about this with Terry yesterday. You look at somebody like him and you see what he's doing right now as a true freshman, 2 games into his college career, and you're just thinking about what he's going to be as time goes on. He continues to develop, continues to get better, and continues to add to what this offense is.
I sent Wes a text last night. I don't know if y'all watched yet the SEC Inside program. Those are really cool. And so they profiled the Kentucky-South Carolina game. So, of course, they're showing practice clips from Lexington, practice clips from Columbia, both teams in the lead up to the game. And, man, Mike Smith, I mean, they had a lot of one-on-one clips, and he won all his. I mean, like, just watching him move around, he's a freak athlete. He really is. We had some people tell us that. Wes and I saw it when he was getting recruited, watching him run around in South Carolina 7-on-7 camp, and you go, wow, this guy can move. He's got receiver skills as a tight end, 6'5", 240, 250. So he's got great size, great speed. And to your point, Tyler, already has shown some of what he can do. One of South Carolina's explosive passing plays in the Kentucky game was to Mike Smith. So I think they'll continue to bring him along. Interesting that Dowell mentioned a few guys by name. One of them was Robbie Ashford. That was interesting. But Mike Smith, when talking about the tight ends, was one of the names out of his mouth. And so I think he's going to continue to play a really significant role, particularly with your ongoing questions at receiver that they need to continue to solve.
Well, if we keep diving into this thing, guys, I think when you look at these matchups, right, and we talked about it earlier, you're facing what is probably going to be a man coverage defense this week. Last week, really, yeah, do you have to have playmakers? Does that part still matter? Of course, but you're talking about kind of trying to manipulate a zone defense last week, and they were able to do that. This week, it's much more like if you were to go to a 7-on-7 or go to, one of these camps where you're doing one-on-ones and stuff, can you separate from that defender in the time that your offensive line can give you against the pass rush? It's really, you talk about rushing cover on defense. That's something Clayton White talked about yesterday. It's, can you manipulate that rushing cover? And so for me, this is a game of matchups. And that is a question for South Carolina. Obviously, wide receivers versus DBs, but it's a question for LSU as well. Like, they have questions in the secondary, which, like we talked about with Josh Pate, that's normally not something you're talking about with LSU. Generally, they're going to rush the passer, and they're going to have amazing elite athletes in the secondary. So do you win those perimeter one-on-ones? I think this is a game where Can Mazio Bennett win some of those inside? Can Jared Brown win some of them outside? It was kind of quiet for the other guys at wide receiver last week, but is Dre Jacobs this could be a game where Dre Jacobs gets loose. But to me, talking about Michael Smith, if you can get some of those matchups where he's with a linebacker or safety and it's one-on-one, those are battles Michael Smith, even as a freshman, can win for you. So could this be the week for him to kind of break out? He's already making plays for you, but could he have kind of that 4 or 5, 6 catch day where he goes for a big number? Somebody's going to have to, whether it's Jared Brown or Michael or whoever it is, somebody in this receiving game is going to have a big day.
I think it's also significant because, again, this is Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator who was at Missouri last year. In that Missouri game that South Carolina lost, Trey Knox was the leading receiver in that game, caught 5 passes in that game. Josh Simon also caught 1. So 6 passes went to tight ends in that game, more than anybody else, on the South Carolina offense. So I think there is a lot of value in what the tight ends are going to mean to this game and that defensive scheme that Blake Baker's going to have on Saturday.
So are we talking ourselves into a big day for Michael Smith
or Josh Simon? Maybe so.
Well, I don't have to talk myself into the fact that they're going to be, if I had to guess, key parts of the game plan, but yeah, potentially. I think two things, those guys are going to have big games. The receivers, I think, are going to have their best performance because it's going to be think about the touchdown plays that we saw in the Kentucky game that we've talked about all week. The first one to Mazio, and then the throw to Josh Simon. And as you pointed out, those were scheme wins. Those are plays against that zone. They still have to work. They still have to be executed by the players. But those are plays where you could say, Kentucky busted that coverage. They busted the coverage because the offense confused them into busting the coverage with how you schemed it, how you executed it. This week, everybody calls them man beaters. They're things you can scheme up, pick routes, rubs, whatever. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go out this week and say, my guy needs to be better than your guy. That's going to have to happen some. And so the tight ends with Simon, with Michael Smith, they've shown the ability in the past to win some of those one-on-ones. Whereas, for the receivers, it's probably a little bit more of a question right now. So that's going to be important. And I do think the run game has to be better overall and not as many negative plays as Shane Beamer pointed out as well.
The best route concept that has ever existed, mesh route.
Yes.
The Mike Leach
yes
staple where you naturally run the 2 drag routes, shallow cross, and pick the defenders off along the way.
It's my go-to in CFB 25, by the way.
It's a good one.
Mike Leach, he'd run it 20 times in a row if he didn't stop it, I think. So maybe we see some of that. I'm still waiting on us to see more of Rocket in the passing game. I think that's something. You're going to, if you're Dow Loggins, and luckily I do think the NFL background does help here some because, as we know, NFL is a game of matchups. Where is that matchup where my guy is better than their guy? So you're going to try to take advantage of those. A huge part, I'm sure, of the preparation this week was picking out who on LSU they want to attack, where they like those matchups, how can you sort of manipulate it to where you will get those matchups. And that will be fascinating to see what direction they go with that this week.
Absolutely. And again, plenty more to talk about for this game coming up this weekend, but we'll wrap up hour number 2. Some news in the world of college football. More realignment. Yay. This one out on the West Coast. We'll hit that coming up next. It is the Extra Point and Gamecock Central takeover of Gold Line Framing in West Columbia. Tyler West Mitchell, Chris Clark going until noon here in the game. Put you to sleep. Put you to sleep. Right. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point Gamecock Central Takeover. We are live out at Gold Line Framing, Tyler Head, Westminster, Chris Clark, going up until noon here on the game. I mentioned this a few minutes ago, just before we went to break there. We have yet again more realignment going on in college football as the artist formerly known as the Pac-12, which we've affectionately been calling the two-pack this year because it's just Washington State and Oregon State. Well, it's going to grow again. As official this morning, the Pac-12 is adding Boise State, Colorado State, San Diego State, and Fresno State starting in 2026. I'm officially petitioning to call this the six-pack because you have 6 teams now.
Well, we had the Pac-12. I mean, it's still called the Pac-12, but
yes.
we're going unofficial names
which
now.
by the way, do numbers even mean anything
No, they
anymore
don't.
in these
They don't.
conference names? They really don't.
Pac-12. It got absolutely
Ravaged.
Yeah, that's the word I was trying to come up with. Ravaged. So then it was the Tupac,
Yes.
but they didn't change the name.
No.
They did not listen to my signed petition. I was probably the only signature, or all of us here. And now we got to go to the 6-pack. Good for the Pac-12. I mean, get some teams in.
I'm in favor. I get it. Like Big 10, Big 12 has less historical significance because they were originally the Big 8. I just think we should drop numbers in conferences altogether because it's become so convoluted. The Big 12 has 18 teams. The Pac-12 has 16 teams. Like, at least the SEC and the ACC are like, yeah, we're going to leave numbers out of this.
But what are you going to call the Big 10?
The Pac.
The big.
The big conference.
Then
Then
the
Big
big
12
one.
can be the kind of big conference.
I kind of like Big 10 still.
B1G.
I feel like you need to figure out.
Hey, that's how I write it.
Me too.
Yeah.
You need to like branding matters. The Big 10, it's the Big 10.
Even if the number doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Remember when they used to hide the 11 in the Big 10, like when they'd write it out because they added Nebraska in 2011 became the Big 11.
Kinda. But I feel like you'd have to, no matter what you change the name to, in the internet era,
Sure.
you are going to be blasted.
Yeah, that's true.
So there is no answer to what you could change it to.
There's not. And look, it sucks what happened to Oregon State and Washington State because they got left out to dry when all the other teams decided to find new conferences. And, when you're in, Pullman, Washington and Corvallis, Oregon, those aren't bustling metropolises that are going to generate a lot of TV revenue. So that's why those teams kind of got left out to dry there. And, they're making do. I mean, this weekend, we actually have the Civil War in the Apple Cup, by the way, for those that are not familiar. Instead of it being the last week of the regular season, it's happening in September. So I appreciate they're at least keeping those rivalries going. So this gives them a little more balance as far as an actual conference goes. They have this scheduling agreement with the Mountain West as of right now, which makes them quasi-members without being quasi-members. But this gives you something, but it still doesn't make you a power conference anymore. You're adding Boise, which, yes, is one of the better Group of 5 teams, but Fresno and Colorado State and all that, San Diego State, like you're still going to be seen as a Group of 5 conference effectively going forward.
Yeah, and I mean it is sad for those two schools, and I fail to see how they mismanaged this thing so badly to where we even got to this point. But we did, and here we are. And I mean, the sign for me was that you're sitting there, you wanted to be able to watch some of what the Pac-12 had going on.
Yep.
And I'm not one of these people that normally struggles with, all right, how do I watch this game? Like, what streaming is it on? What normally it comes pretty naturally to me, and I'm like, wait, I literally can't watch this game
right
without paying more, or maybe even literally cannot get the package even if you want to pay more.
Sure.
And so if you're sitting there, if you have a good product, but there's just no way to distribute it to people on the East Coast, and a lot of times that was a terrible sign for the Pac-12 in terms of managing the new college football era where, as we know with sports, the TV contracts, like that drives everything, especially when nobody watches live anything else anymore.
Mm-hmm.
that drives up the value of sports because it's the one thing you still watch live. I feel like.
And the Pac-12, the two-pack, the two schools that are in there this year, they have right now a 1-year deal.
Mhm.
Most of the other conferences we got an 8-year deal that's for $8 billion. Theirs is 1 year for Fox and the CW, so you can watch One Tree Hill, and then the one Pac-12 game or Pac-12 playing the Mountain West teams. But guys, the other thing that I think is going a little under discussed, they have to add by 2026 that they have to add at least 2 more teams to
Yes.
get to the FBS threshold. So
Right.
some other Mountain West teams are in that mix. Air Force, UNLV, like
Sure.
they're probably going to poach some other teams from the Mountain West as well.
Yeah, and again, when the conference, went down to 2, I think it was a 3-year window that allowed them to exist under that threshold, which is 8 teams, to kind of figure out what to do. And we kind of knew something was going to come on the horizon. It seemed like whether it be just them joining the Mountain West and it becoming the Pac-12 or something, vice versa, which kind of seems like what we're doing here. What this means for the Mountain West, I don't know exactly, because I guess that would drop them down to, I'm thinking off the top of my head, around 8 teams themselves. So you're essentially looking at maybe splitting the conference in half. And do you still have that scheduling agreement? I don't know, but it's pulling together the pieces of something that was a shame a year ago, because the Pac-12 really went out in a blaze of glory. That was probably the best year of Pac-12 football we saw last year, and one of their teams played for the championship a season ago. And again, it's kind of unfortunate, but it's a microcosm for what money and television and all that have done to college sports as a whole these days.
Yeah, and I think the thing at this point is who's left. Who do you go poach? Like, you're out of options in a lot of ways.
The Pac-12?
Yes.
Yeah. Air Force and UNLV.
Do those move the needle?
Not
for
really,
anyone,
but you got to grab a couple.
It gives you numbers. That's about all
The
I can
Vegas
say.
market.
Yeah, that's true. 2 hours down, 1 more hour to go. Again, broadcasting live at Gold Line Framing here in West Columbia. Tyler, West, and Chris going up till noon. Dive back in to South Carolina and LSU coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Hour number 3, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, Wes, and Chris broadcasting live at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia. Going up until noon, getting you set for South Carolina and LSU this upcoming Saturday. Of course, everything gets started with Gamecocks Game Day. Myself and Elijah Campbell this weekend broadcasting live out at the Party Lot at Sound Images, 7 a.m. to 9 will be the game day before game day. And then, of course, network coverage from 9 until noon until kickoff there at Williams-Brice Stadium. I want to dive back into what the coordinators had to say yesterday. Clayton White, who's got to be feeling great right now after 2 games so far this year, compared to where things were in the middle of, last season, was posed a pretty interesting question. We spent a lot of this offseason talking about the 3-3-5 defense, which was a huge part of South Carolina's success towards the end of last year. He was asked the question on the balance of that with also wanting to obviously keep your very successful edge rushers on the field. Cut number 17 here, Dave. This is Clayton White yesterday answering that question.
It's a good question. Naturally, yes and no at the same time, but you definitely want your best 11 on the field. And our guys understand that, we have a deep defense and we feel like only 11 guys can go. So, everybody can't play at once, but they understand we're preaching defense as a collective and understand that when each call is about the guy beside you, it's not about an individual. And we're trying to keep preaching that. I think if we just continue preaching that mindset that we're playing defense as a group, as a collective, I think that it'll keep our mindset where it needs to be.
And that's such an interesting balance because, again, Stewart and Kennard have wreaked havoc so far through 2 games, but you also have a lot of athleticism at linebacker that you can utilize in different ways as well. So it's an interesting balance of when to utilize those guys and who to have on the field at, at what times.
I think you look rushing cover. Like you look at this secondary, they took a lot of heat early last year. And the reason why South Carolina went to that 3-3-5, there's some different things you can do. And at times, the way they structure it on 3rd and long, it creates like a 3 safety look at times, not all the time. But really, it's because they were not getting pressure on the quarterback. So last year, that is what got Bam Martin-Scott on the field. And last year, he was probably your best pass rusher. Like, they did not get pass rush wins from that edge spot. For this 4-2-5 to be successful, you have to have wins on the edge. And so now, I think we're still going to see the 3-3-5 at times, but the question was absolutely correct. When you go to the 3-3-5, most of the time now you can still put pass rush guys at edge and that as well, especially on first downs, though. You're going to put your sort of bigger guys at end in the 3-3-5 because you only have 3 down linemen. 4-2-5, now that you have a Kyle Kennard, you have a Dylan Stewart, you have a Gilbert Edmond back, you have JT Gear, you have Brian Thomas Jr. You don't want to take those guys off the field, frankly. So I think you're going to slowly see South Carolina. We've already sort of seen it gravitate a little bit more towards the 4-2-5, but the 3-3-5 is a great change of pace. Even, Kentucky talked about that, how South Carolina played a ton of 3-3-5 against them last year and was very successful. Carolina hasn't played as much 3-3-5 this year. Kentucky was anticipating 3-3-5 because of the success last year. Carolina comes out, shows 3-3-5 early in the game, then gravitates to more 4-2-5, which I think really, now part of it's just because it's not the scheme necessarily, it's you're winning those battles on the edge when you're talking about Kentucky's tackles versus your edge guys. And so that's certainly part of it, but there was a little bit of a scheme win there too in terms of just Kentucky anticipating one thing, Carolina going with something a little bit different.
Yeah, Will Helms, who does a good job with analytics on our site on Gamecock Central, had a couple things that he put out that prompted me to dive into the numbers. And, Dylan Stewart has looked like maybe one of the best or maybe even the best pass rusher in the country. Again, just 2 games, but he's been really, really good. And according to PFF's win percentage, he is 6th on the team. So that just shows you there's some depth. That's not the end-all, be-all number. Dylan Stewart's pass rush overall grade per PFF is obviously the highest on the team. It's 94.9, which is really insane. Brian Thomas Jr. has the highest win rate, 57% on the team in terms of pass rush. But you think about the guys that they've got. We spent a lot of the offseason talking about adding Demetrius Knight Jr. and what that means, and Bengali Kamara, who played a lot more against Kentucky, but then Kennard, Stewart, TJ Sanders coming back, Tonka. Like, they've got 6, 7 guys that you think about in the front 6 or 7 who can rush the passer, whether it's the linebackers on the blitz, the athleticism that they have with Bam Scott, with Debo, Demetrius Knight, but then the personnel that they have at tackle and edge, they're so much better this year rushing the passer, and that means that you don't have the quarterback standing in the backfield, eating a firehouse sub, delivering the football. It's made a huge difference this year so far.
I also think it's worth noting this upcoming weekend, compared to the last 2 games, you don't have a quarterback where his legs are really a threat. Like Grant Wilson, week number 1, could run the football. Brock Vandegrift, from what we saw, in week number 1 of their game, could run the football. And South Carolina did a good job outside of that, busted coverage, the blitz where they left the gaps open against Grant Wilson in week number 1, have done a good job containing the quarterback run. Garrett Nussmeier is a traditional pocket passer. He is going to sit back there and wait for things to develop downfield. Again, has a very good offensive line that allows him to do that, but you don't really have to worry about him escaping the pocket. How does that change, if anything, your approach this weekend defensively?
I don't know if it changes a ton, because you still don't want to give him those openings, because he's not a statue necessarily. Like, I don't think he's going to look to run, but you also don't want for him to look up and be like, wow, I've got 10 yards of grass in front of me. So I think your principles kind of stay the same. There was an interesting quote from Clayton White, because he was asked essentially, hey, what do you change on defense with those 2 great offensive tackles? And it kind of got me thinking, like, if there's a great wide receiver and that's the only option they have, there's some things you can do defensively to maybe mess with that. Hey, we're just going to double team and we're going to shade our coverage over there. There's not a ton you can do in sort of that D-line, O-line matchup. Like, yeah, maybe you can try to overwhelm them. Maybe you blitz more. But there's a give and take to that. If you blitz more, that puts yourself either in more one-on-one situations on the outside, or if you're kind of zone in the holes in your zone are obviously bigger windows. So I do think some of this week is just going to be about, can your players win battles? And that goes for O-line versus D-line. That goes for these man cover. Carolina plays a lot of man coverage on their defense as well. Feels like they've mixed it up quite a bit in terms of the looks they've shown. But, I think for Carolina, it does maybe, Tyler, give you a little bit of advantage to just not quite worry about, is that quarterback going to leak out and sort of take off? But you can't sort of take it to the extreme to where you're just like, oh, we're going to rush out of our lanes and not worry about him whatsoever, because he's not Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, and that he just absolutely cannot move. I think if you gave him clear spaces, he will take off on you as well.
That's what I saw. I was watching the Nichols State game last night. There were a couple instances where he's got, you could drive a semi through a lane and he's going to go take it then, right? Now he's not going to break off a 60-yard run on you, but he'll go get a first down.
Sure.
Right. So you do have to have, pass rush gap integrity with that. Now it's not as big of a challenge as probably even a Brock Vandegrift or even a Grant Wilson. At some point, though, the answer is, you've got to be able to rush with 4. That's been a big difference for South Carolina this year. We'll see in game how that plays out, kind of a game within the game thing. If South Carolina comes out early, you see them rushing 4 guys, getting pressure, that's probably a good sign for the rest of the game. If not, you got to make some adjustments, because pressure and Garrett Nussmeier is going to be big in this one.
Off of that, let's hit one more cut here, Dave. Cut number 25. This is Clayton White yesterday when asked the question of, does getting home with 3 or 4 make things easier for the defense as a whole?
I'm pretty sure every defensive coordinator said definitely. It's one of those things where, it's better. It's not easy still. We're in the SEC, so, LSU Tigers coming to town, so I know that nothing's easier. It may seem easier on the outside, but it's never easy in this league. And, our guys are still working. They're ready to take on the challenge what's coming this Saturday.
And again, that's the obviously goal is letting your guys up front handle things and making that things easier for the rest of the defense. And it's funny, we spend so much time talking about Stewart and Kennard and what the guys doing on the edge. You're just getting a lot of great play from your interior defense line as well. Tonka got a sack last week, and again, still some work when it comes to plugging up some of those lanes when it comes to the opposition running the ball. But man, great play across your entire defensive front so far this season.
Well, and I look at a guy like TJ Sanders. I already thought he was going to make himself some money this year in terms of getting ready for the NFL and raising his stock. But having those guys out on the edge, I think, especially, Josh Pate talked about this as well with us. Can you earn the right to rush the passer in this game? But I think TJ is a guy, if you have to block him one-on-one in those sort of 3rd and 8 or more situations, he's going to go win some battles as well. And TJ is a guy I always have kind of felt like feeds off the energy a little bit of everybody else around him and sort of can go out there and win those battles. And for me, there may not be anybody on this roster that has benefited more from Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart coming in and taking a little bit of that heat off of him, a little pressure off of him, because when he is out there and in one-on-one situations, because does LSU start to – maybe LSU doesn't because they're so good at tackle.
Mm-hmm.
But these other teams, we saw it a little bit from Kentucky, they're going to start to make decisions. Do we sort of help out over here? Do we chip? Do we triple team, which I feel like you rarely see, but we saw that by Kentucky. That opens things up for TJ, for Tonka, for Boogie, but certainly from a pass rush standpoint, in my opinion, TJ is maybe the guy that benefits the most just because he is so light on his feet for a defensive tackle.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of conversation about Will Campbell, possibly the best left tackle in the country. The right tackle is really good too. These guys are very experienced. They have 4 or 5 guys back overall from their offense last season. It's a good group, right? But I think it's been lost a little bit, the interior pass rush, which a lot of coaches will tell you, is just as important. TJ Sanders, Tonka, Jules, Goodwine, those guys on the interior, even if your edges are not winning as much as they have in the first 2 games, can those other guys get some one-on-one wins? I think that's something that's getting a little bit lost in the conversation.
We'll dive into LSU coming up next. Michael Scarborough from TigerBait.com going to join us on Love Chevrolet phone lines. Again, we're broadcasting live out at Gold Line Framing here in West Columbia going up until noon. Also a reminder, tomorrow, since it's home game, have your Friday tailgate at Columbia Craft on Green Street with Jay and Elijah broadcasting the post-game show from 3 until 6 p.m. Again, Tyler West and Chris, Gold Line Framing, go until noon here in the game.
One of the owners of Classic Roofing has just walked in at Gold Line Framing. I'm going to tell him to get back on our roof, but call Mac or Joe today, 803-590-7870, or head on over to classicroofingsc.com for more information about their services or for a free estimate on your roof. If you own a home or business, of course, you want to make sure your roof is taken care of, and their team of experts, they're well equipped to handle any and all of your roofing requirements. That could be a residential project, a commercial undertaking, or really anything in between. They have got you covered, and they're going to give you peace of mind for how much time you may have left on that roof and give you some ideas of maybe how you can extend the life of that roof. Again, that phone number, 803-590-7870, or head on over to their website, classicroofingsc.com, where you get more information about all of their services, and you can click that link to get a free estimate.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark. Broadcasting live at Gold Line Framing, 511 12th Street here in West Columbia, going up until noon. Of course, getting you set for South Carolina and LSU coming up on Saturday. Head back out to the Left Chevrolet phone lines. Michael Scarborough from TigerBait.com joining us now. First of all, Michael, want to ask, weather-wise, I know the Hurricanes make its way through. How is everything out there in Baton Rouge?
We didn't really get much rain. It's the last, half day yesterday. It started out a little bit east of us, and the Hammond area in New Orleans seemed to get the worst of it. So we didn't even have our power blink last night.
Okay, well, that's good. I know that was a big concern coming into the week about as that storm was make its way through. So hopefully everything's good in all those other areas of Louisiana as well. As we turn our attention to this game, we've talked so much about this from South Carolina's perspective, what it means to the Gamecocks. Game day is going to be here, potential to go 3-0 and all that kind of stuff. On the flip side of it, from LSU's perspective, what does this game mean to them? They're 1-1 on the season. They let the Southern Cal game slip through their fingers. Like what is the pressure and the significance of this game Saturday from LSU's standpoint?
This is a game that I was the only guy in the media in the entire preseason that would point out the South Carolina game as being a dangerous football game without even knowing, what the team would look like. And it absolutely is. Because of losing that opener, LSU cannot afford another loss if they're going to come close to meeting any expectations that anybody has around here. So, I initially was, what if this game gets picked to be a night game? Then as soon as I said that a week later, they ended up being an 11 a.m. kickoff. But now you got game day there. You got a weather factor. South Carolina certainly is feeling good after an impressive win over Kentucky. And LSU still trying to find their way. And going into the season, I said there was two players that you could not afford to be injured. And when you start talking, making predictions of what's the maximum total of wins, what's the floor on this football team, and you got ESPN out there saying the floor was 5 and 7. I thought the floor was 7 and 5, but you couldn't have Garrett Nussmeier or Jacobian Guillory get hurt, and Jacobian Guillory did get hurt in the game Saturday. And it's not like Jacobian Guillory is a first-team All-SEC defensive tackle. He's barely been an adequate tackle for LSU in his career. He hasn't been a starter for the most part until now. But because they're so thin at that position and he's the best you've got, that poses problems. So if I'm South Carolina, I'm stretching the field. I'm spreading LSU out, and I'm trying to run out of those formations. To me, if South Carolina can be effective running the football, they could really, between that and maybe some sort of special teams play, this is absolutely a very dangerous football game. And I don't care what the overall record is between LSU and South Carolina lifetime.
Mike, Chris Clark here. Thanks for taking time to join us today, man. So, on the injury front, give us a little bit more on that, because I was perusing the new mandatory, SEC injury report from Wednesday night that LSU put out. There have been some other guys that have been banged up as well, some new additions. I'm particularly interested in Chris Hilton and Kyle Parker at receiver, who I believe missed the last game against Nicholls State. What does their status seem to be? And are there any other guys that are kind of on the fence who are significant contributors for Saturday?
Yeah, I think everybody else will be fine. Look, Chris Hilton is an exceptional track athlete. Since he's arrived at LSU, he's really just never been healthy. He gets to be 100%, and then he's not. My take on him has been if you don't rely on him, and whatever you get out of him is gravy. And of course, he's hurt again to start the season. Where he's a problem for LSU is I think they were relying on him as being their best deep threat. And, look, Lacey is also a deep threat, but when you start talking about straight ahead speed and the guy that you take a shot downfield was that guy behind, but the next guy there is Parker. Gets an ulnar nerve injury in the USC game, and how soon will he be back? We don't know, and so of course Jacoby Guillory's out for the year. Garrett Dellinger, LSU's guard, missed the game with Nichols, but BK said had it been a much tougher opponent, they could have pushed the issue and he could have played, but they went ahead and sat him out. But he's ready to go. So unless something's happened in practice since yesterday, there should be that should be it.
Hey, Mike, Wes here. Appreciate you doing this. What can you tell us about the job Blake Baker has done so far trying to retool this defense after what we saw last year? And how weird is it that we're sitting here talking about defensive tackle and secondary, just from what I've read, as being some question mark areas, when I feel like that just almost never happens when I think about LSU defenses?
It's really crazy. I thought about asking BK the question yesterday, but to me it's kind of an off-season question, or maybe a question that you'll get an answer for years down the line when he's being bluntly honest. But it's just been a comedy of errors in their defensive tackle, interior D-line recruiting since he's arrived here. Some of it's bad luck. A good portion of the pie chart is Louisiana just not producing defensive tackles in good numbers, and a steady yearly change in defensive line coaches is also been a part of that. So I thought they should have got one or two guys in the portal in December. They didn't. Instead, they waited until May. I think they've got some serviceable guys there. But I think that's part of the reason why a lot of of my peers in the media locally were predicting 10-2 for LSU, which to me was astonishing. They just totally bought into the coaches being the difference when they've got a lot of Jims and Joe's problems on their defensive side of the ball. I think Blake Baker is a fantastic coach. I think he's got this defense on the right track. But eventually there's a ceiling there because you don't have the talent there that you're used to seeing at LSU across all the positions. I think the linebacker position is strong. I think the safety spot over time will be another strong spot. Then you got some nice pieces there on the edge. But your interior defensive line and corner still is not where you expect it to be for LSU.
Again, talking to Michael Scarborough from TigerBait.com. One more for you here. Got about 2 minutes. We know LSU's struggled when it comes to stopping the rush, but this season particularly. But you haven't really faced a quarterback that has mobility like Lenore Sellers has. What kind of problem is that going to pose to this defense this weekend?
Well, look, we're going to see how he dials it up. I mean, they're very aware. I think they're probably going to be a little bit more aggressive, but at the same time, you've got to account for that. And now we're talking about wet conditions, so we're going to see how that's going to play out. One of the things that I said after the USC loss, in the same token for LSU, was I thought that LSU was at a disadvantage if you're not. I get why you don't want to do it. You don't want to have a bunch of design runs for Nussmeier, because if you've got to play a number 2 quarterback, then you might looking at that floor overall record. But when you've got a mobile quarterback that you have to account for, that really puts you the offense at an advantage, and that's until Nussmeier did it against Nicholls State, which I think he needs to do more of. I mean, if you see an opening and you can get 12 yards, you need to take it and run and slide. And he's got a much better ability to slide than Joe Burrow did. He's faster than Joe Burrow. Of course, he's not Jaden Daniels, but to me, just in college football, you've got to have that, and certainly South Carolina does.
Michael, we're certainly looking forward to this weekend. Should be a good matchup. Obviously, the eyes of the nation going to be upon it, and we certainly appreciate your insight this morning.
All right, anytime. Talk soon. Y'all have a good week.
Absolutely. Again, Michael Scarborough from TigerBait.com. Come back. We'll hit a make your case as we get set for Carolina and LSU. Tyler, Wes, and Chris broadcasting live out at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, going up till noon here on the game.
All right, I want to tell everybody about our friends over at Firehouse Subs. If you are hungry here at lunchtime, of course, you know we're always going to make that recommendation. There are 14 different locations for Firehouse Subs all around the Midlands. We're over here at Gold Line Framing hanging out in West Columbia. There's definitely a Firehouse Subs close to us. There's probably a couple of them, actually. So no matter where you are, there's one close to you. Of course, football season's here. Consider Firehouse Subs for all your catering needs or lunch and dinner. As always, check out the new Captain's Club. Has the signature Captain Sorensen's hot sauce, the new Firehouse Hero sauce, plus oven roasted chicken, melted pepper jack cheese, crushed red pepper flakes, crispy bacon, and then lettuce, tomato, and onions. It's here for a limited time. Favorite and easiest way to order, firehousesubs.com. Use the Rapid Rescue to go to avoid the wait and order online, or download the Firehouse Subs app to earn yourself some rewards on future purchases.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark. We have been out at Gold Line Framing all morning long. We've given away tickets. We've bought some stuff, given away T-shirts. It's been a great time as always. And, of course, talked plenty about South Carolina and LSU this upcoming weekend. I want to jump in to one of our favorite games, that being Make Your Case. Today's question, make your case. Which coach on the South Carolina staff, it can be a coordinator, can be Shane Beamer, can be a position coach, doesn't matter. Who has the most to prove this weekend against LSU?
Which coordinator?
Any coach.
Coach.
Any coach. It could be Beamer, coordinators, position coaches.
You want to coming out of left field.
You want to throw Joe D out there? Sure. Whatever you want.
I mean, I'm going to go with, you said non-Shane Beamer.
It can be Shane Beamer if you want it to be. If they are a coach on the South Carolina staff, they are fair game here.
It can be the backup O-line.
The former analyst that now has a new
It can be
title.
the grad assistant watching tape in a closet somewhere if you want to.
You know what? I'm just going to go straight to the top. I'll go Shane Beamer. That's an easy. I feel like, is that an easy cop out answer?
No, I mean, hey,
probably so.
Go for it.
Now again, let's contextualize. I did not go on a segment like our friend Jack Veltri did and say that Carolina has to win this game.
Every game is a must-win game with Jack.
Did you see my reaction?
I did. Safe to say, I don't think we agreed with couching it that way. But it is it's an important game. It is a game where if you win it, now you're 3-0. You have successfully done what we talked about earlier, where you have strung together back-to-back upset wins where you can keep the momentum that you've established rolling. That's something that I think everybody is wondering. And everybody's looking at the head coach for that. We can say, well, Dowell's got to dial up play. Yes, that's true.
That's actually what I'm about to say.
Yeah. But, I'm just going, and I do feel like it's a cop-out answer, but ultimately I think it's on Beamer. One of his strengths in the past has been taking his team when people have buried them, kind of like they did after the Old Dominion game, and coming out and saying, actually, no, we're going to not only win, but put together a really good performance. Now I think, not that they've never done it in the past, to take the next step, when people are giving you flowers, can you prepare, motivate your team to go out and get another big win in a row?
True. Yeah. Tyler, did you have an answer in mind when you came up with this question?
I did.
For yourself?
I did.
You did?
But I'll let you go first.
Okay. I go back to Dow Loggins, and I'll be honest. I thought he had a pretty darn good game plan last week.
Yes.
And, it's easy to be like, well, the offense was still a little iffy in the first. The starting quarterback got hurt at the end of one of those. So Sellers came out the final play of a drive. So you didn't have your quarterback for third down. And then he missed 2 full drives. And you could tell they changed the game plan for those 2 drives. And then you had 2 pretty chunk plays wiped out by holds in the first half as well. So you had the great drive. You had a kind of an ugly drive to start, but you had the great, perfectly executed, well-called drive. And then you had an end-of-half situation. So really the first half, how many opportunities with your quarterback not backed up in your own end zone did you really have? Not many. And so then second half, they had a little bit better field position and ran the ball a little bit better, made a couple of adjustments, and they played pretty well. So I thought that was a big step forward. Like we talked about, there were some scheme wins in the game that I give credit to Loggins for. I give credit for him, in my opinion, leaning on Sean Elliott a little bit on some of those runs and being collaborative as far as that goes. And so credit where it's due. Now I think this is an opportunity to show, hey, this offense is moving forward as a whole. Like they are getting better. It's not just kind of an up and down thing. It's not a one-time thing. It's, hey, you can take a game plan against one type of defensive scheme and then go into a game against a completely different approach to defensive football and also find a game plan that will work, which I know these NFL guys, they know what works against what coverage is. It's not really there's no guessing there. Like they know, oh, that's the cover 3 defense. These are the areas we're going to attack. The difficult part is, can you come up with a plan that works for your players against their players with what they want to do? And if they throw something different at you, can you adjust before you get back to the Sunday film and say, man, this is probably what we should have done? So I don't look at that as like a calling him out thing by saying him for this. I look at it like, hey, last week was pretty good. Like, credit where it's due. Let's see if South Carolina can continue to make progress as an offense.
I agree with you. I'm going to go with Dow Loggins as well. And look, we knew going into the season, this offense is going to be way different than it was a year ago. You have so many new faces, new starters, and all that kind of stuff compared to what this team looked like last season that it was probably going to be a progression type thing. Now, again, they were a little bit farther behind than we wanted them to be in week number 1, but we saw steps in the right direction in week number 2 against a better Kentucky team than what you played in week number 1 against Old Dominion, at least what we thought. This weekend, you have a tougher opponent in LSU. That being said, it's not, a Alabama 2012 defense or something like that. They have deficiencies. They struggle to stop the run. Their secondary isn't that great. Again, their best defensive player in Harold Perkins is currently not in a position where he is being utilized to his best abilities right now. You have an opportunity to exploit what they suffer at and go out there and put on a good offensive performance in front of the entire world of college football this weekend. I think that's a lot of pressure on Dow. It's not to say he can't be up to it, but there's a lot of eyes on what this offense can do this weekend to be able to be successful on Saturday.
Well, and they say pressure is a privilege. So I think if you're South Carolina, the pressure of this week, it may be there, but this is what you have wanted, and it got to you a little bit out of nowhere. Let's be honest. If there was a top 10 matchup in college football somewhere else, would game day be in Columbia right now? No, they would
not.
They would not be. But take advantage of it. Take advantage of this opportunity. So is there a little bit more pressure this weekend? Not just on the offense, but on everybody to go out there and perform? Yes, there is. But that's what you want. That's why you play SEC ball. That's why you coach in the SEC. Nobody wants to be in games when you're 2-6 and fighting to where you're saying, man, thank goodness our fans still care, but do people on a national level care? No. There are going to be people tuned in to get a first look at this. Who's this Lenora Sellers guy that I've heard a little bit about? Who's this Dylan Stewart that I've heard a lot about in the first 2 weeks? They're going to be dialed in to see what they're all about. And so that's an opportunity for you. And I think there's only so much a coach can do. Ultimately, it's going to be on the players to go execute. But having a great game plan, putting these sort of younger guys on offense in a position to succeed is going to be big for South Carolina against an LSU defense. May not be the same we're used to, but they're still LSU. They still have some dudes. They still have Harold Perkins, who's one of my favorite players in college football, actually. And I think there's going to be a lot of fun games within the game with this one.
And I know none of us chose Clayton White, but this is also a big prove-it weekend for himself and his defense as well. Because, again, Old Dominion, Kentucky, first 2 weeks, not world-beating opponents by any means, and Kentucky may end up being really, really bad as the season goes along, and we continue to watch how they play. So you have an opportunity against a ranked team and a pretty solid offense in LSU. Again, they do struggle to run the ball as of right now, but still very good pass game to go out there and put your stamp and say, no, we are the defense that we believe that we are, historic, donuts, all that kind of stuff, and to put that on display in front of a lot of eyes on you this weekend as well.
Yeah, it's a heightened challenge for sure. You look at the front, if Kentucky was a prove-it game for this defensive front for South Carolina, they passed that test with flying colors. This one's going to be a little bit more. It's a different type of challenge for them and for the defense as a whole. We've talked about, Garrett Nussmeier, better quarterback than you've faced so far this season. The type of offense that they play, they're going to challenge you deep. Some of the receivers that they have are really good. It's going to be a different type of challenge. So I think even if you would have said, hey, Clayton White, like that could have been a fair pick as well because of the challenge that you're about to undertake here.
Absolutely. Reminder, Sips and Sounds, the only craft beer, wine, and spirits tasting event held indoors under the cool AC. No rain, no heat, no worries, unlimited sampling of over 40 brands of local and national craft beers, wine, seltzer, spirits, all coming up on Saturday, September the 28th. Gonna have live performances by Ken and Drew of Sister Hazel, Days and the Donovan Twins, and more. Get your unlimited tasting wristbands now at sipsandsoundscola.com. Again, that's at sipsandsoundscola.com for that coming up again here in a couple of Saturdays. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs live out of Gold Line Framing. Talk to Joni once again from Gold Line Framing coming up next here on the game.
All right, y'all. Hopefully you're out at Gamecock Park early on Saturday and in Williams-Brice Stadium in your seats early, ready to go as well. But for a lot of the other college football action this season, or even when you get home after the game, you're going to want to make sure that you have the very best audio visuals set up. And I got just the guys to do it for you because they've been out to my home. They've been out to Wes's home. They can come out to yours too. It's Michael and Nathan from Integrated Media, our friends over there. You don't have to go to the big box stores. They can source the equipment for you, whether it's just, hey, I need a new TV, whether it's a complete home theater setup or that man cave that you've always dreamed of, your outdoor setup, your screen porch, your patio. They can do all of it for you. IntegratedMediaInc.com or give them a call, 803-948-8327. They specialize in smart home installation services right here in the Midlands. Again, IntegratedMediaInc.com, 803-948-8327.
Again, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Metro Chris Clark. We've been hanging out all morning long once again at Gold Line Framing, 511 12th Street here in West Columbia. And we were here just a couple weeks ago and talked to Joni then. Got her back on now. Joni, first of all, thank you for allowing us to be out here once again. It's always a good time. We've had people come in, we're giving away tickets. We got these great hats, a lot of cool stuff going on here at Gold Line.
That's right. As usual, it's great to see you guys, and thank you for being here. And yes, we've got all your Gamecock needs. We've gotten in a lot of really neat stuff. We do a little home decor along with the custom framing. So we've got Gamecock checkers, caps, jewelry, napkins, tailgate cups that are just really cool. So yeah, we got a little bit of everything.
I told Terry yesterday we're going to make Chris frame something while we were here. I didn't hold him to that, but maybe next time.
That's right. He needs to bring it in. We do about anything here. We're custom framers, so we cut all the frames, glass, and mats ourselves. We do shadow boxes. The most exciting thing that gets us going is just bringing people's work that they have on the walls now, all of their decor, changing it into something that's something new, that's updated, a little more modern, kind of giving their house just a flair, just a change, something from the norm. So we really enjoy refurbishing people's existing framing to something new. So.
Well, I've always thought if you've got like a man cave, or you've got like that little area of your house where maybe you have some sports memorabilia, or maybe you have, especially these days with all the NIL stuff where players sign things and you can go to these signings, I feel like you could take a signed print and or you have these photos here where you have Colonial Life Arena, Williams-Brice Stadium, and you can really make something, I feel like, that takes it to the next level a little bit and put it on the wall if you have like one of those areas of your house that's for entertaining but watching the game a little bit. I feel
absolutely, yeah, we can definitely turn something into spectacular. You'd be surprised what we've done with some of the even wrinkled up stuff that maybe doesn't make it from the event, that's that you don't just want to throw in your chest of drawers, but we can definitely bounce it up. We even have Gamecock engraved framing. Of course, we have a special now with our diplomas that we're offering, 20% off all diploma framing, and we have probably 10 or 12 options of that. So that's always something to keep your mind on. So many people just stick it in the drawer under the bed or behind a door and don't even think about getting it framed. So that's something that we do year round. So yeah, we can turn anything into something spectacular.
And it's not just things in frames. You were showing us over. You also have Gamecock checkers as well now, which is pretty neat looking.
Yeah, that's right. They are pretty cool. We've set one out for display, and we were really happy to get those. And we've been lucky to work with some local vendors and some people that actually have some really cool stuff. So we try to pull it all in.
Now, out of everybody here, who's the best checkers player?
I don't know. I would say it's probably Kendall. Out of all of us, she's probably the most athletically strong person, just in her mind and athletically. She can just roll off the tongue any type of stat too. She puts y'all to,
puts us to shame.
Yeah. I didn't say that.
She probably does.
I filled in the blanks for you.
She tests y'all for sure. I've heard it.
She listens a lot, which
she does. That's why
appreciate.
she's so good at what she's at. So yeah, she does good.
So if we're coming into town for the game this weekend, hopefully you come on in on Friday. That'd be a great day to swing by and set something up. I feel like maybe get something for tailgating, but also anything you've got at your house that you've been like, I want to get that framed up. You've been putting it off. Maybe a good time to swing by.
Yeah, that's right. Just swing on by this week as you come into town. Our hours are Tuesday through Friday, 10 to 5:30. We are here Saturday mornings from 10 to 12, mostly pickups. But if you drop something off to us this week, chances are when you come back for the next game, we're going to have it for you. We try to turn everything within a couple of weeks if it's not anything too complicated. Sometimes shadow boxes may take a little longer, but we're here to make your life easier and wonderful. So, I mean, we can do a lot of different things here with the framing. So please come by and see us.
You're going to be out there bright and early Saturday morning, tailgating ready for the game?
Yeah, 7:15-ish. Bloody Mary, hopefully by 7:30, no later than 8. Chick-fil-A on board, the minis, you know, it's on.
Sounds pretty good.
Who's winning?
We are.
Okay.
I already gave y'all my stat last time you were here.
What's your score this time?
8 wins this year. Oh gosh, I'm gonna say 14. I'm worried about the weather. The rain, the
Yep.
rain's kind of giving me a little bit of an angst. So I'm going to say 14-9.
We're going old school.
That's
low
old.
score.
That's
Old
classic
school.
old school
That's
SEC
classic
right
old
there.
school. That's right.
I would
Football in
love
a
that.
phone booth.
That would be fun.
Yep.
That'd be a lot of fun, certainly.
Wouldn't
And again, with how good South Carolina's defense has played so far this year, if you held LSU to 9 points, I think we'd all feel
no
pretty
kidding.
darn good coming away from that one. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're winning if that happens. What there? I feel like there was a 14-9. That number you pulled that number from somewhere. I feel like was there a Georgia game that was?
I don't remember what game it was, but I believe there was one. I just remember that score, and for some reason, I'm kind of going on that with the scare of weather. But yet we're used to the weather, so I don't know.
I'm gonna say the weather is not gonna be a factor.
Not
Like
gonna be
I'm
a
just gonna be
factor.
positive. Like I feel like the weather is gonna just miss
gonna
us.
just
How about
miss
that?
us.
It's
That
gonna
sounds
rain in the
fabulous.
morning and in the night, and then at about noon, it's gonna be clear as day.
I'm with you on that. That'd be great.
Hopefully so. Well, again, we thank you so much for allowing us to be out here
Yeah.
once again. Always a good time here out at Goal Line Framing, 511 12th Street here in West Columbia. That'll do it for today's show. Coming up next, halftime show with Terry Ford and myself when I get back to the studio here on your Thursday on the Game.
All right, y'all. Before we hand over the mic, let me tell you about our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. Since 1983, that's Krantz with a K, Cooling with a K. Head on over to their website, krantzcooling.com, or you can just give them a call, 803-672-3224. Obviously, we know it's famously hot. Summer is almost over, but pretty soon we'll have some cool temperatures. You want to make sure both your air conditioner and your heating systems are taken care of. So let me tell you about preventative maintenance and how important that is. You don't want to wait until you have an issue with your AC or an issue with your heat. Go ahead, let them come out. Again, call them 803-672-3224 and do a complete inspection of your unit. Make sure it's working great. Make sure it's working efficiently so you don't have all those high power costs as well. Krantz Cooling, again, krantzcooling.com. That's 2 Ks or 803-672-3224.